Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks provides unique mentoring opportunities to enhance your modeling skills by connecting with talented modelers and manufacturers from around the globe who generously share their knowledge and artistic expertise. Build your confidence, refine modeling techniques, and share your projects with a supportive community of fellow modelers, all while enjoying the world's most rewarding hobby. Join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Zoom and YouTube for our free live program. Missed a program? No problem. Individual show segments are uploaded to YouTube for convenient on-demand viewing. Be sure to connect with the New Tracks community by joining the New Tracks Facebook page where you can interact with other modelers and see what they are modeling. Visit our website at www.newtracksmodeling.com, where you'll find information about upcoming events and the latest issue of our monthly newsletter, Observations. And now, here is the host of New Tracks Modeling, Tom Farrell.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to New Tracks Modeling, a live Zoom and YouTube show that airs every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. New Tracks Modeling was founded by Jim Kello with the goal of fostering a supportive and educational community where mentors help modelers model. Before we begin tonight's program, let's take a moment to hear from our show's sponsor, Brennan's Model Railroading.
Tonight's New Tracks Modeling Meetup is sponsored by Brennan's Model Railroading. For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products focused on the O-scale market. Their flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. The prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, Brennan's has developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Brennan's also has craftsman kits that anyone can build. The complete photographically illustrated instructions assume you've never done this before, and explain in step-by-step detail how to create an outstanding model. The Frank Ellison Tribute series of kits are amazing additions to any layout. These kits take Frank Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level using modern methods and materials with Dennis Brennan's additional details and amazing instructions. See the complete line of products on the Brennan's Model Railroading website. Use the QR code to visit.
I want to personally thank Dennis Brennan for sponsoring the show. And now I'd like to go over this evening's program with everyone. And we do have an exciting program this evening. I'm pleased to inform you that we have Curtis Koch from Broadway Limited Imports, one of the major producers of HO and N-scale locomotives in the world. I personally own at least a half a dozen Broadway Limited locomotives. And then we have, after that, Jamie Bothwell, converting heavyweight Pullman cars in S scale. And then an interesting little education. David Shultz is going to educate us on rail code, and then next time scale and gauge. But this evening we'll focus on, rail codes and how they relate to scales and gauges. Next we have Martin Brechbiel, part 3 of 3 on Donovan's Repair and Machine Shop in his Scratch Builder's Corner segment. And another longtime participant, Steve Sherill, on his narrow-minded focus on narrow gauge, why we choose, what we model, and the scale that we model in. This will be an open discussion. And then I'm going to give something on my Rustic, Buff, and Old Gothic, a section called Turtle Creek that I just finished. And then we'll have the show closing and the Caboose, the final video from the Pittsburgh narrow gauge convention. Before we begin with Broadway Limited Curtis, I'd like to run our scholarship video.
Are you a model railroader going to college in academic year 2025-26? If you are pursuing a STEAM degree, apply for the New Tracks Modeling Mentoring Scholarship. For the 2025-26 academic year, 3 $2,000 scholarships will be available. You can apply online at the QR code shown or on the New Tracks Modeling website. Model railroaders can support the New Tracks Modeling Mentoring Scholarship, the only national scholarships for model railroaders from a nonprofit organization. Donate online on Zephy. All donations are tax deductible.
Our scholarship program was 2 years in a row now. We've awarded over $6,000 in the form of 3 $2,000 scholarships to STEM students. And I encourage you to make a donation. It's a very worthwhile program. And you can find out, go back to this video and scan that QR code, go on our website, or check it out on our newsletter. But please go ahead and take that step and make that donation. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome a guest from Broadway Limited Imports, Curtis Koch. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. We very pleased to have you this evening, and as a user of your product, it's great to, though we did meet several years ago at a show, it's great to have you on the show this evening.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Sorry, I was running a little bit late. I've been working on some new announcement stuff that we're coming out with this Friday. So we've got a lot of fun stuff in the pipeline, and I'm happy to dive into some model railroading topics with you tonight.
Terrific. What was how you got into Broadway Limited? Have you been a long time model railroader?
Yeah, so my dad and I both have been model railroaders. I'm originally from the Chicago area. I grew up in the northwest suburbs of the city, and I eventually moved into the city for a job in radio broadcasting. I was actually helping with sports broadcasting in the city with a radio station there. And I worked there for about 5 years, and the job for Broadway popped up that they were looking for somebody to handle marketing and social media. And that was around the same time that I was doing social media stuff for the station that I was doing. I was helping out with the Chicago Blackhawks coverage and the Chicago White Sox coverage that we had on the station, and the Chicago Bears too. So I worked for 3 out of the big 5 teams in the city. And model railroading had always been a passion of mine. I myself am a Santa Fe modeler. I collect mainly Santa Fe stuff from what I like to call the super fleet era, if you will, from about 1989 till the pre-merger. So I have a lot of old school, or not old school, but red and silver war bonnet stuff with the big Santa Fe lettering on the side, amongst a few other items like that too. And my dad has always been a big Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy fan. So we had a couple of home layouts growing up that I always helped be a part of. And I probably would say I've been a model railroader for at least 20 years, maybe 21, 22 to be exact, around that time frame. So I've always been really passionate about the hobby. I've always been one to have a creative outlet of some sorts, and I think this hobby does a great job of that. So I've always been a big fan of model railroading and the prototype itself. It helps when you grow up 30 minutes from Illinois Railway Museum and you spend a lot of time going there and seeing the vast majority of their collection that they have. And for many kids, it starts with Thomas and it grows from there. And that's the same sort of timeline that I had too. And yeah, the Chicago area really helped fuel the fire for railroading and model railroading.
That's interesting. You know, I have a story about how I got into ON30 was because of Broadway Limited. I had been in N scale since I was a child, from 1967 to 2005, and I had a inkling to get into scratch building more and more, and N scale was just too difficult. So I went on the Broadway Limited website, and I ordered a couple HO locomotives, and they happened to be on back order. And I said, what? And then I looked on the site and I found these ON30 C16 locomotives. And I said, well, let me try this. And I ordered two BLI digital locomotives, and I've never looked back. So I got into ON30 accidentally, and because you were back ordered on a couple locomotives.
But it's a happy accident though, because you found your thing there.
Yeah. So tell us. I think we all assume that, probably rightly so, that HO is, by far the largest scale and probably the largest product offering you guys have, and then you do dabble in N scale, of course. What is the approximate ratio? I mean, do you see significant
I mean,
sales?
if I had to give you a guess, and again, I don't have any solid numbers on this, but I would say out of every 10 customers, I would say 8 out of 10 are HO scale, and the other two would be N scale. N scale is a smaller market, but they are still a very vocal market. They are very passionate about wanting to get new items, and we're committed to bringing new items to N scale. But in terms of just the market ratio value, we see, like I said, 7 to 8 out of 10 in terms of HO to N scalers. And it's a very wide margin, and we that's why we have a tendency to offer a lot of stuff in HO scale first before we bring it to N scale. Because for new ideas that we have, it's good to test it out in the larger market and get that feedback before we decide to go through the effort of taking it from an HO scale model and putting it into a much smaller N scale model. Like we look at our steam locomotives, we've offered smoke now for our N scale steam, which is something that has been offered previously, but from us at Broadway, it hasn't been possible. And we heard from a lot of N scalers in a survey we did back in 2022 that a lot of N scalers would like some more features that the HO scale guys have. And so we've been trying to slowly incorporate more and more of that, but it's so tough with just the size of N scale to bring that to N scale versus HO. So for us, it's definitely something that we love to dabble in both scales, but as terms of where we primarily focus on, we mainly go to HO scale.
A lot of our viewers, I mean, I have a business background and understand how you have to cover your material costs, your labor costs, your overhead, your SG&A, and make a profit. I think a lot of our viewers would be fascinated to know, what is the process at Broadway Limited when you're going to do a new product introduction? What's the process to say, okay, we're going to do a HOF unit or a GP4? I mean, what is this? I mean, you sit around in a meeting. I mean, how does it tell them, the mechanics of this and the decision-making process?
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors that go into it. First and foremost, for us, at least when we're looking at, let's say, a new steam locomotive, we have a pretty heavy market on HO scale steam. There are still some brass manufacturers that do make steam in HO scale, but in terms of other new projects like that, we're really cranking out a lot of new steam locomotives. And for us, we look at the history of what has sold well versus not sold so well. You look at a UP big boy, and customers love our big boy, and we get comments, oh, you're doing the big boy again. Well, the big boys are always very, very popular. It's arguably the most popular locomotive on the rails right now. If every project we made sold like the big boy, we would be cranking out a lot more newer niche things, to say the least. And there are a lot of niche things that we're getting to, like just most recently, the Boston and Albany Berkshires, A1A Berkshires that we announced at Amherst back in January. That's a project that, Boston and Albany compared to Union Pacific, who has the bigger fan base. Well, I'd be dumb to say if Boston and Albany had the bigger fan base. Everybody knows Union Pacific has the bigger fan base. So it comes into customer size. What's the market there for that? It comes into, okay, what sort of manufacturing things are we going to be able to save? If not, are we able to reuse anything? Like the Boston and Albany Berkshire chassis, we are able to reuse because that came from our Boston and Maine and Santa Fe and Southern Pacific T1A Berkshires that are now in stores. So reusing parts like that helps keep production costs down and allows us to make a few of those more niche models that you wouldn't really typically expect us or any of our other competitors to make. But it helps keep those costs down, and that's just one of the many factors that goes into it. There's always, what's popular big steam is always a big popular thing. Streamlined steam is a big popular thing. Okay, and then we look at the diesel market. Okay, there's a lot of modern diesels out there. Which ones have not been done of well or not done enough of that we can offer multiple other road names and paint schemes of. We look at the GP35, for example. Our Jeep 35s have been extremely popular, even though there's been other companies that have done it before. We've dabbled into some of the lesser known paint schemes and road names that other companies have not done. Wheeling in Lake Erie is a good example of that, where we offer that road name and we sold hundreds of those units in this current production run that again hasn't been offered before. Dabble into the passenger car market. We're looking into making a lot more business cars. Our UP Kennefic business car number 119 has been a huge seller for us. We're completely sold out. We're building about 5,000 of them total. And before that, you'd only be able to find that car as a brass model. And you'd be paying anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 for it if you're able to find it on eBay or anything like that. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Like I said, market availability, is it something that people can get a hand of? Referencing the business cars and stuff. Well, the big boy is one of the most popular things right now. And what goes with a big boy that customers are going to like? Well, they need more of the actual passenger cars that go behind the train. I know Walters, one of our competitors, has made the dome cars and the coaches and some of the tool cars, but they haven't made the observation platforms besides brass. And not a lot of customers have the money to drop $1,500 to it. So if we can offer it and build it for a much cheaper price and at the same quality of detail, that's a win for us, and that's a win for the market, and that's a win for customers, all over the place. So there's a lot of angles that go into it. It's not just throwing a dart and picking, which model we want to do. There is some strategy behind it. And we're really thankful that our customers love the stuff that we're making and that they're constantly ordering and they're wanting more. And we've gotten a lot of great ideas from customers on our product suggestion portal. That's a part of our website. So we actually then have data from many modelers that say, hey, I want this particular diesel or I want this one. And if we have hundreds of people that are saying that, okay, then we'll take a look at that more seriously. So, like I said, it's a wide variety of factors. I could spend another hour going into it with you, but that just gives you a glimpse.
You probably don't recall, and I'll only ask you this once, but for the narrow gauge crowd out there, particularly the ON30 crowd, of course, there are limitations in, what you can offer because you have to have a market for it. And one of the things that the brass locomotive people do, as you well know, is they'll take a deposit for a locomotive when they achieve a certain number, whatever their minimum production run is, then they'll go ahead and execute the production run, in essence, taking the risk off the table. That's the only way you can. They've sold brass locomotives like this for years. I cornered you a couple years ago at a show, and I said, would you ever consider doing that in ON30? And what would be the production run, and would you be willing to wait a couple years with sufficient deposits?
Um, you know what? It's a production run to be successful on a newly tooled locomotive would have to be anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 orders
Uh,
or pieces.
let me interrupt you. What if you took one of your, we're not proud in ON30. What if you took one of your HO mechanisms and popped a shell on it?
That's another question. I don't know how much in terms of tooling and adjustments we'd have to look into. It depends on the size of the locomotive. It depends on the scale down of it because we like to do things accurately. And if we're going to make the tooling investment to scale down an already tooled locomotive of some sort, in many cases to tool a newly designed locomotive from the ground up for steam locomotives at least can be anywhere between $200,000 to $500,000, depending upon the size, the mechanisms, all that sort of stuff, the parts that are available. Because we have, we're thankful to build most of our models in die cast, but we also have to sometimes do things with a brass hybrid line where we have handcrafted brass boilers and such. But for us, especially for something niche that we consider in terms of what our customer base is in terms of narrow gauge and ON30, we would have to see some pretty sizable orders
Yeah,
for that to come in.
yeah. I just had to throw that out there so our viewers would know that
But
there.
but trust me, if there is people out there, like I said, I've told customers before, please tell us in our product suggestion portal. If you go to our website, broadway-limited.com, you go under the club tab on the top of the website, you'll see the portal there. Just fill out what locomotive and stuff you're looking for, and if we get a lot of requests for it, then we'll definitely look into doing it. We're not opposed to anything, we really aren't, but we're a little bit afraid or hesitant to put the investment into hundreds of thousands of dollars to tool a locomotive like that accurately if we're not going to see the return from that from in terms of orders and from customers.
Around, but we can leave this at rest. I had another question. When you do a new locomotive, how much engineering is done in the States? Do you do the CAD for the shells in the States, or do you leave that to your Asian? I assume everything's probably made in China, correct?
Yeah, us, just like many other manufacturers, we all have designers and stuff that are all based in China. And we use our design team in China. We have currently 8 employees that design a variety of different things. And they're always working with us. We're in constant communication with the factory to figure out just how much changes need to be made, what costs are going to come from that. And then when we get a CAD design, which is the 3D images, not like the one behind me here, but like the actual design where you see the parts and everything like that. Then we have to go in and myself and a few others, we actually examine the 3D CAD and just determine, hey, this part is a little oversized. Hey, this part here needs to be tweaked here, or et cetera, et cetera. And then that's how we check the accuracy of the models from there.
What is the typical lead time? So let's say you decide to make a, whatever, GP40. Uh, what is the from a consensus at Broadway Limited to bringing it to the market? What is the typical lead time?
On a GP40 or any
Any,
sort of diesel
any,
like that. Yeah,
any,
but if we're gonna do it accurately, and if there's multiple types, that's the main thing. If there's 4 different types of locomotives that we're doing with road specific details and stuff, it can take anywhere from 9 to 14 months, depending upon the project, the size of the project, etc.
oh, you
But that's typically the time frame that you're looking at.
I meant locomotives in general. So it's pretty much a year, you would say, from,
Yeah, about average about a year. Yeah.
and that's pretty much the same for, you don't make freight cars, if I recall, but you make passenger cars.
Rolling stock takes a little bit quicker than that. Rolling stock, I would say probably anywhere between 8 to 10 months on that because it's usually one type or 2 types and it's consistent. The only difference would be deco, would be what the paint schemes would be on it.
And you don't make anything for the European, or it's strictly North America?
Yeah, strictly North American. That's where we see a lot of our customers based out of.
Okay.
We do have a lot of European and international customers, though I will say, and they're fantastic. And they I get sent videos constantly from customers who are in Australia or in France, who have our models that constantly are running it on their railroads, and it's cool to see. It's kind of funny to see a big boy running on an Australian layout, but
Yeah.
but it's still cool nonetheless.
Where do you see the future of model railroading? Do you see it as a growing market? Do you see
I
it as a stable market? Do you see it as
Yeah, I I see it as a growing market. I really do. Amherst was a good example of that. We had 27,000 people come through the doors at Amherst for attendance wise. And in terms of all of those people, not all 27,000, but all the people that came up to the booth in the thousands, I would say probably 60% of them were people under the age of 35. So there's a
correct?
lot of youth that's in the hobby and that are getting involved, and they might be new, they might be involved with like how my dad got me into it. There is a lot of youth in the hobby, and I don't think that they're quite as outspoken or as seen a lot, but I do think that there's a lot of youth, and I think the hobby is set up for a great future.
Where do you see, I mean, you're an HO and you're an N. Would you ever dabble in O or Z scale, or you stick to your guns, the big markets?
We haven't decided whether or not to go into O or Z. We get asked by O scalers a decent amount if we would ever try. We have made O scale water towers in the past, so we have dabbled a little bit. My boss Bob and Ken Silvestri, who many of you might have seen before, with Broadway, they all come from an O scale background of working with Williams and Lionel. And so they have that background. But we haven't dabbled into the O scale market. For us, there's many different reasons, but the main thing for us is just our market size and our bread and butter is in HO and N. And I would think if at some point we would break into O scale, it'd be something new for all of us because I don't think anybody in our office has really dabbled into that. Most of us are either HO or N scale guys.
Seems like Lionel, they're getting literally thousands of dollars for these locomotives, and they're like spacecraft. They have so much electron. I mean, it's very, very impressive what they're doing. And I, well, I would guess that might be they could probably use a competitor, would be my guess.
Well, they've got a few. Atlas is in O. They've got a few other competitors in O. But I would love to see us dabble into O scale at some point, especially with some rolling stock. I think our rolling stock could do pretty well in O scale. But that's unfortunately not my call. That's up to the bosses.
Your distribution channels, are they basically just direct to your website, or do you have dealers? What's the bulk of your sales right off your own company, I would guess?
Yeah, so the bulk of our sales is we work with a dealer distributor network. So our sales, our products, like if you take a look at any steam locomotive or diesel or whatever, when it arrives to the port of Los Angeles, we distribute it from our UPS warehouse to the distributors. Distributors include Horizon, Hobby Time, Emery, Walthers, Train World, etc. We have about 7 or 8 different dealers that we work with. And when those dealers get those models, or those distributors, should say, get those models, they then ship it through to their local hobby shops, the dealers. And that's how it's all dispersed. It goes through basically a 3-step process from us to distributors to dealers. There's a few dealers that get direct. Train World is one of them. But most of them that we work with are again through that. And we like to do that because we like to support the local hobby shops, the small shops, mom and pop shops that have been the backbone of this hobby for so long and continue to be. There's a lot of great hobby shops out there. I grew up near Lombard Hobbies, so I was a big fan of always going into their store and seeing their stock. And I've always been to a few other places in the Chicagoland area. But there's a great network of dealers out there. And every time we go to a show, a new dealer comes up and says, "Hey, I just want to say I appreciate you guys working with us," and that sort of thing. So we love working with the small businesses. We believe that's a big foundation for us, and we always appreciate them.
A lot of people probably don't realize, or maybe as a secondhand thought, when you do introduce a locomotive, whether it be steam or diesel, there's also spare parts, right?
Hmm.
You
Yep.
have, at least in my old ON30, you had an exploded drawing with all these part numbers. How does that work? So once you introduce a locomotive, do you immediately start carrying all these parts as well? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so that's part of our purchase order with the factory. So when we have a new product that comes in, the factory will usually give us probably about 2 or 3 samples or models for parts from each item number. Thankfully, we don't see a lot of Paragon 4 stuff get returned, so we do have a surplus of Paragon 4 parts, but we do have some older parts that occasionally have run out. Like if you have a locomotive that's from QSI days, so back in like the early 2000s, the factory won't make us those parts anymore. And same with the electronics. So we're very thin on those parts still. But if you do have something, it's always best bet to contact our service department and give us a call and talk to Melanie. She helps facilitate that, and she'll help get any sort of products you're looking for um, into your hands, and that way you can fix your locomotive. Or if you're not comfortable doing that, I know some guys aren't comfortable doing that. They're afraid they'll break it. They can always send it into us in our service department. We got 4 guys that work their butts off, that know our models like the back of their hands, and they're always willing to help you out and make sure that they can return the model back to you as good as better than they received it, or better than you bought it from. So they do a lot of hard work on that, and they're great guys, and they work really hard on that.
Curtis, we have about 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is, since we're a live show and the whole idea that we have a Zoom is so that our participants can actually ask you questions. So I'd
Yeah.
like to open to the Zoom guys. Would anyone care to unmute themselves and ask a question of Curtis?
Yeah, Curtis, this is Bob Geldmacher. I hope I didn't miss this in the earlier discussion, but with the new tariffs going into effect, how's that? Have you guys talked about that in the company, and how do you see that impacting the business?
Yeah, so good question. The tariffs we don't think are going to impact us that bad. So far, with it only being 10%, it really shouldn't impact us much at all, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. If it does go higher, we'll act accordingly. But as of right now, we don't have any or worries or anything like that about if a 10% tariff is going to impact us. If anything, it might raise our prices maybe less than 10%, maybe 5%, and then we would eat the other 5%. But as of right now, we don't have any plans to raise any of the prices of any projects that we announced. So as of right now, everybody's good. You don't have to worry about the prices going up on anything you have ordered.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Someone else, please?
We have actually a YouTube question. The question is if the axle gear is available for the ON30 C16.
That I don't know off the top of my head, but like I
Okay.
was telling Tom, if you guys contact our offices, broadway-limited.com, you can go on there. You can email David. The email for that is tech support, TECHSUPPORT at broadway-limited.com. You can email them and they'll be sure to help you out and make sure you get the parts that you need. Like I said, I don't manage that, so I don't know off the top of my head, but they'll be more than happy to take care of you.
I'm going to call you. No. Do we have any other questions from the
Yeah,
Zoom?
Curtis, I have a question.
What's up?
Are you looking into battery power at all?
Battery powered, you mean like in terms of replacing decoders or?
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
we have not, and the reason for that is that a lot of customers right now they really like our Paragon 4, and if they prefer to use our diesels with aftermarket decoders like ESU, Loc Sound, or TCS, they get our Stealth Series stuff. So as of right now, we don't have plans for battery powered locomotives, but it's always a possibility. If some point down the road, we're always thinking of different innovations and ways to improve our models. And if that's something we can look into, then we'll go for it.
And another question, since you've already produced a 280 ON30, what happened to the tooling for that? It would seem to me like you could bring that back with improved gearing or improve on whatever the problems were before, because there's nothing in ON30 right now. Since Bachman dropped out, the market is there.
Yeah, so the tooling for ON30 for us was previously used by Precision, and one of the part owners that owns Broadway, along with Bob Gruba, has access to that tooling. So we no longer have access to that tooling anymore. That also things included in that tooling are like the California Zephyr cars, and a few other projects of that. So we no longer have the tooling for that. So if we had to go into looking into making a ON30 280, we'd have to literally redesign it from the ground up again. And like I said, invest all the money that goes into that. I'm sure it would fix all the problems from previous runs. But it's again, it's the heavy investment into that. Like I was saying, anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000 to tool these locomotives is a lot of money for us to invest in.
Mhm.
Curtis, who owns that tooling now? Precision?
Precision, yeah, they had that tooling.
So we could heckle them, I suppose. Are there any other questions for Curtis?
How do you determine what road names you're going to be putting on your equipment?
Good question. It's a variety of things. If we're doing a Jeep 30 or a Jeep 35, any sort of diesel, we usually go with the most popular road names in the first run. Our most recent run of SD70s, for example, we got BNSF, Norfolk Southern, CSX, Union Pacific, and then we also did 3 Union Pacific heritage schemes and 2 Norfolk Southern heritage schemes, and a couple other unique BNS or UP schemes like the George Bush 4141. So basically, we just take the handful of that are the most popular and throw it into the first run because the logistics behind that is that we would help the sales that we would get from those numbers of the most popular ones would help kind of cover the tooling costs and the deposits for that. And then when we bring in the other schemes that are also popular, the rest of the UP Heritage units, the rest of the NS Heritage units, other road names involved in there, that's when we see a higher profit margin for us because the tooling costs are not involved in a rerun project like that.
Okay. And well, one more question. How do you guys determine the price of a product?
That's also a good question. It varies from the electronics that go into it. So for Paragon 4 and Stealth, the difference there is usually for steam locomotives, anywhere between $100 or $150, but most of the time it's around $100. The other price is that we have to go off of what the factory quotes us. So when we're building a new steam locomotive and they give us a quote of they'll give us this tooling price for $275,000 or whatever the price might be, we have a spreadsheet that we then enter in numbers of, okay, if we can sell X number, what's the margin and return that we could see on this? And if we think that's doable, then great. If not, then we have to change the pricing to maybe help kind of meet that where it's a profitable product for us. Then I get paid and others get paid, and we get a little bit of leftover to come up with new projects.
Now, I know that you must be giving a suggested retail. Am I correct? Price on
what project?
On any of your locomotives, you have a suggested retail price you give to your distributors?
Correct. Yeah, we have an MSRP, and then we also give dealers what's called a MAP price. It's a minimum advertised price, and that's usually 20% off of that. So when you see dealers like Train World and others selling below MSRP, that's because they're following our MAP policy.
Well, you got a great product, I'll tell you that. I'm impressed.
You've got good taste, so I could tell.
Well, not an HO anymore, though.
That's all right.
Are there any other questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah. Hey, Curtis, this is Chris Kors from Conowingo Models. We had talked a couple weeks ago at Amherst. You said at the beginning that you had some teasers for us. What do you have for us?
I don't know if you saw the locomotives behind me here, but we're announcing on Friday the Norfolk Southern. We're announcing a rerun of F units, and we've actually gone through and retooled some of our moldings and stuff to get the accurate Norfolk Southern executive F units, and these have never been done accurately before. So you can see it's got the recessed headlights or ditch lights rather that will work. And we're also offering a few other schemes too. We're offering the Chicago Northwestern as one of them. They had an executive business train, and we're actually building the C&W Fox River theater car. So you got some locomotives to pull your theater car. And we're also offering these Norfolk Southern units in their current state, which is with the Aberdeen, Carolina, and Western, and the Reading and Northern. They're both in different paint schemes now. So we're offering those accurately. And you'll find the full list of all the paint schemes we're doing and everything on Friday, but this is the newest announcement that we've got coming out. And I know a lot of customers and a lot of East Coast modelers are going to be excited for it because, like I said, nobody's offered these units before accurately. And we're really, really excited with how these are going to turn out.
Okay, I think we have time. One more question.
Curtis, this is Joel McCurry. How do these special runs like this sell, and what's your production quota, and how do they sell versus other units? Like if you were just offering plain F units in different schemes.
So the exclusives that we offer, so like if we're looking at a Train World exclusive, we've partnered with them before. What we usually do is the minimum number that they get is 60 units. That's usually the minimum that we see for that. And if they sell more than 60, that's great. Then we can keep building more than the 60. But they're guaranteed 60 and nothing less. That's how these exclusive runs work. But for other paint schemes and stuff like that, we have other toolings of our F units and other projects like that where we can pick paint schemes or different versions of a road name that we haven't done before and kind of tweak in there, or if we haven't done it in a couple of years or in several runs, then we kind of bring it back into the mix. And usually they do pretty well sales wise. It's for us, it's always about offering new and innovative things into the market. And for something as unique as like I said, a Norfolk Southern F unit that's never been done before, but it lasted until 2012, I believe, 2009, 2012, something around there. It's a really popular item, and it's something that we're excited to see kind of come into fruition.
Well, thank you, Curtis. This has been really, for me, it was really great to have you on, and I'd like to invite you back.
Yeah, I would love to come back. Love to come back.
I think next time we'll open it up earlier to our Zoom viewers, participants, and it's just been fascinating. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well, and I really appreciate it for the invite, and I'm more than happy to come back at some point in the future. And it was great to meet you all, and have a good rest of your show.
Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you. Have a good one, guys. See
Really
ya.
appreciate it. Thank you. Well, that was terrific, and we're going to do more of this. These major manufacturers. We're going to kick the show off with soundtracks, for example. We have lined up Bachman. We have lined up. I'm eventually going to contact Lionel. Just good way to kick the show off, and good interaction between our participants and these manufacturers. By the same token, as I always say, we're going to support our cottage manufacturers, the Carroll Creek Designs of the world, if you will, because they're an important aspect to the hobby as well. And so it's a balance, yeah. Next up, we have News and Views S-Scale with Jamie Bothwell. But before we start that segment, we have a sponsor, the National Association of S-Gaugers.
Are you looking for something a little different in your model railroading? The National Association of S-Gaugers suggests you take a look at S-Scale. An S-Scale model is just 36% longer than an HO model, but it's 2.5 times the volume. The larger size translates to increased ease of maintenance, more durable details, and improved electrical and mechanical reliability. S-Scale modelers use accurately proportioned wheels and track systems with KD-style couplers. Exceptional S-Scale models and layouts are being built in both standard and narrow gauge. Locomotives and rolling stock are available from a number of manufacturers in both ready-to-run and kit form. Equipment is available both new and through an active secondary market. There are numerous manufacturers of track, buildings, vehicles, and details, both ready-to-run and in kit form, available for those who love to build. And many S modelers enjoy kit bashing and scratch building in the larger size S offers. To learn more, visit the website of the National Association of S-Gaugers. Here you will find the history of the scale, information about clubs in your area, see layouts and connect with current manufacturers and online groups, plus much more. In short, the website has everything you'll need to explore model railroading in S-Scale today. Come on board and visit soon.
Appreciate the National Association of S-Gaugers sponsoring our segment. Jamie, you're up.
Hey, how you guys doing tonight?
Hi,
So
Jamie.
tonight we're going to continue with my saga of kit bashing Pullman cars, one of my subject that's near and dear to me. So I will share my screen here if I can do that. And let's see. Oh gosh, do I not have it open? I thought I did. All right, I'm sorry. Let me go back and find it again. No. Let's see, where is this? Oh, there it is. Okay. So try that again. Okay. Oh, am I sharing now? Are you seeing this?
Yep.
No?
No, you're fine. Just
okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me just go to the view then, slideshow. Okay. So there you go. All right. So news and views. This is me. All right. So converting heavyweight Pullmans. As you recall, we're building an 812. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the room side of the 812. So you might be asking yourself, why are we doing this? Why are you not advancing? Come on, slides.
Use your page down page.
Try that one. That's what I was doing, was using the page down thing, and it wasn't working. So there's a little button on the corner I can use. All right, so I compiled some numbers here. 12 section, one drawing room cars. There are about 3,900 of those. Approximately half of Pullman's heavyweight fleet was 12-1 Pullman. So usually if you see a preserved Pullman somewhere, it's a pretty good chance it's a 12-1. 10 section, one drawing room compartment cars, there were 640 of those. 16 section, 350. 14 section, 284. And 10 section, two drawing rooms were 253. And you can see that our 812 is the fifth most popular heavyweight Pullman car. That and the fact that it's just a fun challenge to build them. So there's that, to take a look at. And also, some of the trains that I hope the model carried 8 section, one drawing room, two compartment cars. So here's a room side of the American Model's 12-1 car. So again, I saw you the last time we looked at the sections. Okay, so you see these paired windows here, and I'll just click ahead and you can see that. Those paired windows are the 6 sections. Okay, now you might say, well, wait, I thought it was a 12 section. Okay, well, there's 6 on either side of a center aisle. Okay, the sections would fold down into your upper and lower, and so that was 2 beds. And the person who paid for the upper got to ride backwards, and the person who paid for the lower, which was a little more money, got to ride facing forward. Now, as an 812, of course, we only need the first 4 of those sections, so those last 2 are going to get shifted out. Basically, if you look at those last 2 sections and then that next single window, which I believe my next slide says that's the drawing room. Okay, okay, I'm sorry, let me say that again. What you're seeing now is the drawing room, but basically you look at there's 2 pairs of section windows. Now I call those section windows, and Pullman used them as a Pullman has sort of standard designs. You'll notice that there's a paired window in the drawing room that's the same window as the section windows. So it's very handy for those of us who want to kit bash them, because a lot of the windows you just have to move them around. They're not necessarily different windows. They use that section window in a lot of different cars. So anyway, I needed to take off those last 2 section windows and basically slide them over to what is now the left, and then take that single window and slide it over to the right. So that's what I was going to do. All right. Okay, so previously, what I had done is cut out windows from a sacrifice car and cut out windows holes, taken out the spaces that I needed moved around, and then I carefully filed them and fit them back together. So I put new windows into the old holes, or however you want to term that. But I obtained this nifty razor saw. It's an Ask razor saw. I bought it from a place called Sprue Brothers. They kind of specialize in plastic models as opposed to the railroad hobby. But anyway, you got to be able to expand your horizons a little bit. So I got one from them. I believe Micromark sells a similar tool. Now, when I bought this, they offered it as, I think they called it a straight handle or something, and they offered it and an offset handle. And I, for the life of me, they didn't really have a picture. I couldn't figure out, or from whatever picture they showed me, I couldn't figure out what I was getting. So I took a risk and went with the offset, and I'm kind of glad I did. So when I got it, I was like, oh, that's what offset means. So, the straight one just kind of sticks straight out like that. And this one, of course, it comes out at an angle from the handle. So I recommend the offset one, but I've never really used the other one. I suppose if I wanted to get expansive, I could have one of each. And of course, the blades on there, I think that the coarse blade, I think, is 24 teeth an inch or something like that. They're very, very fine. And then the thickness of the blade is about a 5 thousandths. So they're really super thin. So my goal, I got this new razor saw. My goal was to be able to just cut out the windows and move them around. So I would be able to save the windows. And then instead of saying, okay, I have this sacrifice body that I'm going to cut up and use it, I could just reuse the windows by moving them around. So let's see what we got here. Click that. Now, what I did was I would put a square up against the body to make sure that if I was cutting, north and south on the thing, I was cutting straight. And of course, I use a straight edge if I was cutting east and west to try and do that. Now, this is a stage photograph. It's got the roof back on the Pullman, the roof is sort of the next segment. So, when I'm back with the more Pullman segments, we'll talk about the roof. But anyway, that would keep me cutting in a straight line, right? So that's how I would do that, is to put the square up against the bottom of the car and cut north or south, or if you just use a straight edge to cut east and west. So what I did was I put on some masking tape again to try and preserve any other details around the cut. And so that was again, that was my plan, was to cut out that just that segment right there and be able to reuse it. And then let's see, there's a picture of the saw in action as I started to cut the groove in there. It's just slow and tedious work, but you just work at it a little bit at a time, right? So but you can see that my project was not entirely successful because I ended up having to cut off the letter board too. What happened was I kind of I should have left the straight edge, the for east-west cutting on there a little better. I should have either positioned it better or I should have left it on a little longer, but my saw wandered up into the letterboard just a little bit. And then I also realized that my plan was great until I figured out how I was going to try to cut the pieces out right up to the edges there. And I suppose I could have taken the blade out and kind of moved it just with my hand without having it in the saw. But I thought that might be a little tedious because I would have had to go, probably a solid 1/4 of an inch, maybe even more, to get into the corners of my cut. So it was a great plan while it lasted. It just didn't last very long. So I ended up just cutting out this bit. Now I didn't do the whole, I still left the whole the bottom of, underneath the windows because all I had to do was move windows around. A little later on, I'll show you, not today, but at some other segment, I'll show you a 12-2 that I built. And that is that one I had to cut whole walls off because I had to replace the vestibule. It's a single vestibule car. So here's my 3 pieces that I cut out from the sacrifice body, and I measured them carefully. Now, one of the reasons that this is successful is, again, I use my straight edge to cut the up and down cut, and I try to cut very close to a window, or there's like a rivet strip along here. So I try to make it line up with something that would be sort of a gap anyway. And so there's very little if you file it nice and smooth and you join it up, there's very little space that you see there that the pieces are joined over. So you can see this one over here. This middle one is it's cut where the window is sort of cut off. And then when I push it up against the other one, then it's the right size for the window. So I cut off the one window very close to the pillar. And then the other one I cut off just barely the other side of the pillar. And when I push them together, I get a window that's the right width. Now, this other window, let's see, I'll show you this. Let's see. So when I push them back together, you might notice that the window farthest to the right is a little narrower. That window was a little narrower on the car. It was done on purpose. And so that was a bit of a bother because I ended up cutting those out, I think 3 times before I got one I was happy with that. I matched up the size and I had the panel, and, someplace I go, oh, shoot, I meant to leave this and I didn't cut that. And I wasn't paying enough attention to what I was doing. So I ended up having to cut that 3 times. But in the end, I'm pretty happy with it. So, but that's kind of what it looks like all stuck back together. Excuse me. And so there it is. All there's the new side pieces all put in. They're all put in. You can see, count the sections from the left. 1, 2, 3. Well, start with 2 aisle windows, right, and then count the section windows. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's that small window, and then there's, I believe, that small window, and then the 2 other windows are the drawing room, and then the other 2, the next 2 pairs of windows are the 2 compartments. But basically, you can kind of see, if you look close, you can see because the paint's a little different, but kind of those, everything between that narrow window and then the next 5 windows along has been replaced. So that's what I did. You can see that I've worked on the underframe there. I'm starting in to remove all the pieces of the underframe that the details that are in the wrong spot or not necessarily up to snuff. So that's going to be a later segment also. So there's a close-up. And again, I got a few patch jobs to do in there, a couple, but you can see, again, by try and use the edges of the windows very carefully, you can make pretty good replacement pieces that it's not very noticeable. So again, careful cutting, careful filing, that's the secret, and then the pieces just drop in. So, and I think that's what I got for tonight. So thank you for having me on.
Amy, that was just great. And the techniques that you're using could be used obviously in any scale.
Absolutely.
And I'm toying with, if I ever get my railroad to some point, to take some ON30 Bachmann passenger cars and modify them to some extent. And I have some donor cars as well. So a lot of what you're doing is applicable to what I'd like to do probably next year. But it's kind of neat to watch it. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a little tip here. I actually have purchased some ON30 passenger trucks from Bachmann because I find that, if I re-gauge them, they are somewhat useful in S scale. There's a couple of cars that have a truck about that size. But here's the tip, okay? So when you go to Bachmann's website, it says trucks, and the price looks very attractive, but what you're really getting is truck, not trucks. So I ordered three. I ordered three thinking I was getting three pairs, and I got three. So just understand, make sure that if you're going a whole car, make sure you get two. And if you're going to do two cars, make sure you get four. So that's my Bachmann modeling tip for the day. So
thank you very much for participating in this evening's show, and we look forward to your next presentation.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have David Shultz, O-scale modeling. He's going to give us a little education in rail code. But before we have David on, we're going to have our My Build video and a little word from Chris Course.
Don't miss the monthly New Tracks Modeling My Build event. My Build is where the modelers of New Tracks show what they have been building. See amazing modeling with some My Builds featuring specific topics for modeling. If you would like to have your models included in the My Build, please email your modeling photos to Chris Course at railrunner130@hotmail.com. If you are a first-time My Build participant, please include a photo of yourself.
Chris, if you could tell us a little about what's going on in the next 3 to 6 months, that would be wunderbar.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Curtis, if you're still on. That was very, very enlightening. All right. The upcoming My Builds, February 26th is the next one. It has a challenge show. It is kit bashes and scratch builds. To participate, please email me your photos by February 23rd. That way I can get them all put together in one slideshow. Future shows, March 26th is a free-for-all. And then in April, we'll have another challenge. April 23rd is automation, animation, basically whatever you can do to make it move, and whatever you can do to fit into that category. Then in May, we will have another free-for-all, and we're going to have elections for the show themes for the upcoming year for the challenges. And then in June, we will have the water. It will be the theme for the challenge. It'll be waterfronts, bridges, boats, anything you can fit into that category. So, if you have ideas for what you would like to see for show themes, please go ahead and email me those at any time, and we'll take care of that and compile all that for the survey for the next year. So, right now we have 6 entrants for the challenge in 2 weeks. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to you, Tom.
And I want to, like I say every week, the My Build program is one of our most popular segments. And I encourage our viewers, both YouTube and the Zoomers, to participate. You need only take photographs of your work, submit it to his email that he provided, and you can be part of the show. So thank you, Chris, and we look forward to February 26th. Next up, as I said, we have David Shultz. He's going to give us a little education on what is rail code, like code 18, code 23, code 100. So David Dropbox Schultz, you're on.
I've been called a lot of things, but never Dropbox. But all right, well, welcome everybody. This is kind of going to be a yawner, I think, of a presentation, but we'll try to make it as interesting as possible. Rail is kind of the foundation of railroads. And in the early days, rail was basically made out of, I'm assuming, like 4x4s with, steel strap on top of it. And as things got heavier and heavier, of course, they had to change the way rail was made. And so they came up with iron rails. But what they discovered pretty early on is things were getting heavier and heavier. Iron was kind of a soft metal. Well, of course, came along steel. They figured out if they added some carbon to the rail, it would get stronger and stronger. And of course, you go into the metallurgy part of it. They've discovered other things that make rail really hard. In fact, it can get so hard that it'll break. But that's, like I say, off into the weeds. But anyway, rail sizes in the real world, they had 12-pound rail. And the way they came up with their weights on rail, this will really drive the metric folks nuts, is that they took a 3-foot piece of the rail, weighed it, and that would be what they'd consider the weight of the rail. So 1 yard of rail weighs 12 pounds, it's a 12-pound rail. And of course, it worked its way all the way up to, I think, Pennsylvania had 155 or 156-pound rail, which is just got to be amazing stuff. But the weights of the rail, changed with the size of the ball of the rail, which is the top part of the rail. The web can be anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick, and then the base of the rail. But they pretty much got it settled on a kind of a standard size. But anyway, that's how they came up with the weights of the rail. So then in the model railroading world, they decided to come up with a code for the rail. And the code was simply the thickness of the rail. And I've got 3 photos to kind of demonstrate that. So whoever's handling the photo section, if you want to put the first of 3 up. So here we've got a piece of rail, and this is code 100 rail. And the manufacturer will tell you that's plus or minus a couple percentages. So, this is coming out at 98, but it's code 100 rail. So it's 100 thousandths of an inch thick, or basically 1/10 of an inch thick. And in the HO world, that was big rail, and in the O scale world, it's not. Next photo. Here we've got 138, code 138, coming in at 140. But once again, code 138. And then the last photo, and this is code 83. That comes in right on 83 thousandths of an inch thick. And that's where they came up with the idea of code. And the reason I came up with this program, I've had people on my O scale railroad, I'm using code 100 on some of the sidings and stuff. And I had a gentleman comment, why are you using HO rail on your O scale layout? And code 100 isn't necessarily HO rail. It could be pretty much for any scale, depending upon the weight of the rail that you want. So I made up a little chart explaining some of this, going all the way down to code 40. Now, I've never seen code 40 rail. N scalers probably have, because in N scale, code 40 comes up to 115-pound rail, which is about right for mainline railroading today. In S scale, it's 25-pound rail. In HO rail, it's 70-pound rail. And in O scale, it's 12 pounds. So in O scale, you probably use it for like the rail going into a speeder shed. That was very light rail, probably left over from the old mining days with the mine carts and stuff. 25-pound rail in S scale, not really sure where you'd use that. HO could use code 40. It's 70-pound rail. That'd be something to work with, I would think, in HO scale. Then you move up to the code 55 thousandths of an inch. N scale, that's 156-pound rail. That's pretty heavy duty stuff. So I think that's kind of their standard. I'm not sure. The N scalers could probably clarify that, but I think code 55 is probably what they're using for the most part. And yet that's a little large for unless you're doing the most modern of railroads today. But you get down that small, tough to tell anyway. In HO, that's 70-pound rail. And In S scale, it's 40-pound rail, and in O scale, it's 25-pound rail. So you can see that these codes all work in all 4 scales, the ones that I'm mentioning. Now an O scale, once again, it's pretty small, 25-pound rail. But then you move up to code 70, N scale, that's 195. HO is 100-pound rail. So that's pretty popular in HO, I would think. S scale, 60-pound rail, and O scale is 40 pounds. Still not real usable in O scale. I'm sure there's, I think I would use something like that for maybe a check rail on bridges and the like. But then you get up to the more popular one, the code 83. Now, I think that's most of my friends who are in HO, that's the rail they like to use. And for good reason. It comes out to about 132-pound rail, give or take a little bit. In N scale, it's 227 pounds. That's pretty heavy duty stuff. Not even made today. So, and S scale, that's 90-pound rail. So code 83 would be nice in S scale if you're doing branch lines or old railroad. And O scale, that's 60-pound rail. That works well for some sidings. I've seen grain elevators, old grain elevators, and for the most part abandoned, but they still had 60 and 70-pound rail going to these grain elevators. Back in the day of 40-foot cars, 60-pound rail was more than enough. And then the old standard, the code 100. So I didn't even bother with N scale anymore because that's got to be up there close to 300-pound rail. In HO, that was 156 pounds. So you can kind of see why people moved away from that and down to code 83 for HO. S scale, it's 115-pound rail. Code 100 worked beautifully for them. In O scale, it's 80 to 90-pound rail. And next up was the 125. In S scale, that's 136-pound rail. O scale, 100-pound rail. And then finally 138, which is what I'm using, that's 115. And then code 148 is 136. So you can see the code really has nothing to do with the scale of the train. It just really depends upon what you're modeling. If you're modeling sidings, you're modeling main line, you can use a variety of rails in any scale. There isn't a particular scale for any of that. It's just depends upon what you're looking for in your modeling, the size of the rail you want to put in. That's, without getting too heavy duty into the weeds, that's about what I have for this week. But next month, we're going to talk about the difference between scale and gauge. That seems to be a real confusing part also. People are confusing gauge with scale. And of course, in O scale, we got Lionel that, their older stuff, they just kind of, I think some of their old boxers and stuff would probably scratch or kit bash well into S scale cars, and yet they would call that O scale. So that'll we'll try and straighten some of that out for the next show. But that's kind of what I have for tonight on rail without putting people to sleep too much. When I started looking into this, you can really get off into the weeds because the study of rail is something that's, just gone way beyond what most of us even think about anymore. The wear and trying to fight, the breakage in winter, how they lay the rail and stuff. So I just thought I'd stick with the code part so people don't confuse code with scale.
David?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was great because a lot of people do confuse the code with scale. I think for the next show, if you could, we could post that table, or if you email me that table, I'll dress it up for you. We could post that at the beginning of your show. And then you might want to just mention wheel flanges too, because there's all flanges all over the place with model railroading.
Yep.
And that would be an interesting one as well with your, maybe that could fit in with your scale and gauge program.
Yeah, because I'm doing Proto 48. So I can show like the difference of standard O scale and then fine scale and Proto 48 and there's many different flanges and stuff. So I can put together something. I've got a few older Lionel cars that I can compare to what I've got now. And then like you and I were talking about, the narrow gauge railroading. Yeah. And anyway, like I say, without getting too deep into it, but we'll get something put together here for the next time.
One final clarification. When you say pounds per rail, that's per foot. Is that what we're talking about?
No, it's per yard.
See?
3 foot.
So there
Yeah,
we
it's
go.
a 3-foot section. And like I say, I don't know where they came up with that. Probably 150 years ago, and they're still using that dimension to this day. But it's
Well,
the weight of a 3-foot section of rail.
That's a little bit of information I didn't know. So
Yeah, that's where they came up with that. And then, like I say, in scale, they just decided whatever the thickness of the rail is. So, like the 125 rail in O scale, that's basically 6 inches tall. So that corresponds pretty well with 115-pound rail. But I've seen people go off, actually it's 7 1/4 inches tall. And it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Well, manufacturers can only do so much with it. So
I think it's an interesting topic, and it's a very educational, because I'm certain there was a lot of confusion on scale versus code. So thank you for this, and we look forward to your next presentation.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
Next up, we have Martin Brechbiel, who is a multi-talented individual, as well as doing world-class scratch building. He's our editor for our newsletter, Observations, which has a circulation of over 8,000. Before we introduce Martin to do his Donovan's Repair and Machine Shop, part 3 of 3, I'd like to run the Observations newsletter video.
Get more new tracks modeling by reading the monthly Observations newsletter. Each edition of Observations includes exciting articles about modeling shown on the show, other modeling topics and prototypical railroading information. Other articles focus on outstanding model railroaders and new products from a range of suppliers. Don't miss the photos of the popular new tracks my build. You can download Observations for free from the New Tracks Modeling website. Subscribe so you don't miss an issue.
I encourage our Zoom participants and our YouTubers to submit articles into the Observations newsletter. It's a great way to get engaged with New Tracks modeling, and then maybe someday we can get you to do a live presentation. So up next is Scratch Builder's Corner with our hero, Martin.
Where?
Oh. My hero.
Oh boy. Boy, we're both in trouble. Let's see. Here we go. Got way too much junk on my screen. Yeah, there we go, I guess. Okay. So yeah, it's been 2 weeks, so I have to remember where I was or where I even am right now. I would say I'm perpetually lost. So we're going to pick up from part 2, which was, I think, 2 weeks ago. We had the structure sort of assembled. A roof was going on, and I'd slopped some paint on it, kind of haphazardly, just to get a good, well, not so good of an undercoat, so we know where we're going. And I think that's where we stopped, give or take a little bit. Some doors were in, some chimneys were in. Got a rough 2-tone paint job started, some details added, but it's in between. It's on its way. So let's go a step forward. We've got 2 coats of paint on everything now. Chimneys are painted. There's some a little bit of weathering on the one, some color variation. The doors are painted, and I've added a base. So this one's, I've got some. I lucked into a 5 or 6 sheets of very nice plywood at an estate sale out of the basement of somebody's house that I pittance, that I knew I will use it someday, and someday has come. So it's going to be cut up and put under models or whatever else I can think to do with it. It's actually way too good for that, but at the price I paid for it, I don't care. So we have a base. And you go around the back side of the building, you can see we've got some slop on the roof around that one chimney. The roof is all on, nice and sloppy, just the way I want a tar paper roof to look. I don't want it nice and tight and clean. I want it to be lifted up and messy. I just put that down with carpenter's glue and leave it loose and don't worry about it too much. And around the other side, you can see it's some tar around the base of the other chimney. There's about 6 different colors of red on that chimney. I just grab everything I have in red and polyscale and kind of randomly make bricks, be whatever color I want them to be. Okay, so go back around the front. Okay, all those windows and doors I had, like they were all the windows were painted and glazed. It's the one thing I hate doing more than almost anything else is glazing windows, cutting out acetate or mylar or whatever it is you like to use. I used to love to use polycarbonate Lexan, but I can't get it anymore. I don't know where to get 10,000 Lexan, but it used to come from Clover House, but that's no longer ongoing business at the moment. The shutter's been painted and added as well. So we go around the end. We have those fake rafter tails. Same story. We got 2 windows in place, 2 shutters. Everything's glazed. Shoved it into the holes. Just a little bit of goo on each window casting holds it in place. Don't really need a lot. It's fairly snug. Not too snug. You have the hole too small. You warp the casting. You pop your glazing out. And colorful language will ensue trying to get the glazing back from the inside of the building. Go around the back side. That one window that I made with a hinged shutter, painted, glazed, and put back in place. Everything's got a coat of paint on it now. Well, that's interesting. This is the other side, the last side that had one final window, sorry. So now we have everything painted and glazed and in place. Forgot about the 4th side. Oddly enough, a rectangle has 4 sides. I don't know how I forgot that. So let's take a fast forward into the future and closer to the end. We've got some signage. We'll start with the signage, despite it saying scenery first. Signage is it's all a PowerPoint. Print it all up in PowerPoint, cut it out. Scalpel and metal ruler and glued in place on the walls, on the doors. We have a no admittance go around back. It's closed, going fishing. Scenery supplies, it's basically woodland scenic stuff. It's gravel, but some of that stone, the stone over here to the left, that's actually out of the basement, out of my house in Pennsylvania. That's what's underneath. That's what the basement is. It hasn't got a floor. It's all gravel. It's stone dust, as they call it. Some castings, a barrel, some crates. I've forgotten who makes it. I think this is actually Wiseman Models. A little combustion engine, some lighting added. That lighting actually goes through the building out the bottom. It's actually can be wired for and turned on if I so choose. Go around the back side. Well, given the condition of this chimney, we had to have a ladder. So I put a ladder back here. Some waste barrels on a pallet, off a pallet, some oxygen tanks. I don't remember what a red cylinder is. In my laboratory, it was either hydrogen or hydrochloric acid, but I don't know why you'd have that. Crates, some theater chairs, another pair of theater chairs, put those around back. And of course, the sign here says no admittance, go around front. So you're pretty much going around in circles, which is generally how I am anyhow. And we go around this end. Look at this nice winch. This is a Crow River kit. Lots and lots of pieces, lots and lots of fun putting together, getting all the gears cleaned out, meshed together, assembled. The instructions are decent on these. It's a lot of fun. Quick. It's a couple of days because you want to take your time with it and paint each piece as you assemble it. Or you try and paint it once it's assembled, you go crazy. It's much easier to paint all the parts and assemble it piecemeal and then finish it up later. This cable is actually surgical silk. And a hook, I think, yeah, that comes with it. Oil tanks, gas tanks and such. This is actually from Berkshire Valley. It's a nice set of castings. Comes with the pumps and everything, even the spigots, faucets, whatever you want to call them at the end. Another piece of ladder here just in case something gets clogged up and you need to get up on top of your tanks. This is actually, there's a piece of resin underneath this. It was all one big resin casting, so I didn't like that being exposed. I just covered it up. More stones, more debris from Woodland Scenics, some scenery, odds and ends, debris, and some added little details. Like right here underneath the shutter, that's actually a railroad spike, tie spike holding the shutter open. So I went back and actually drilled holes and added these all the way around to hold the shutters open. Wouldn't want the shutters get closed while you're messing with your models. And you can see that they're right here again. One little spike, and some weathering, mild, nothing too extravagant anywhere on this model. It's polyscale washes, and then some not pan pastels, but some
Chalk?
not chalk. It's the paint. Well, I can't remember the word.
Pigments.
Pigments. There's the word. Thank you. Yeah, I would have remembered it otherwise about 3 o'clock this morning coming up. It would have woken me up. And a little white light weathering on the roof just to say it's not new. It needs a little work. It's going to have to get recovered eventually. And we're done. And next week, I don't know what I'm doing next week because I haven't given it any thought, and Tom hasn't asked me yet. So don't ask me now because I don't know. And so you're just going to have to come back next week and find out, just like I do.
That is an excellent model. It's amazing what the weathering did to the basically those solid primary type colors, the gray and the off red. The weathering really set that model off. Yeah.
It just needs a little, and not a lot. And I'm adding that with oddly enough Q-tips.
Yeah.
And little micro foam brushes. They're a couple of millimeters. Dipping it in it, just swabbing it on, and then using the Q-tips, smear it around, and pull off what I don't want.
You find
Martin, we have a comment and a question from YouTube.
Oh, goody.
Comment was Google .010 Lexan as a suggestion for glazing.
Okay.
And the question is, why do you use surgical silt for cabling?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, I have a lot of it, and it was free, and it's sitting in my shop in my basement, and it came on lovely wooden spools too. It's long yardage of it comes, and I have it in 3 different weights. It's braided silk. It's virtually unbreakable. Try and break it. If you try to put it in between your 2 hands and pull it apart, break it, snap it like you think it will with any other type of stuff, twine or whatever, all you're going to do is cut your hands. It's incredibly powerfully strong. I use it for all kinds of things. It's also braided, so that shows up. If you look at that picture carefully, or look at the model carefully, you'll actually see the braiding in that exterior. So it's an obscurely small detail, but it's there. I use that for just about anything where, truss rods. I use it for all kinds of applications. I just happen to like it. And, like I said, you can't break it. You have to cut it. And I'm usually using surgical scissors or a scalpel blade. And you had a second or those were the 2.
Very good, Dr. Martin Brechbiel.
Okay, well, technically can use the title, but I rarely do.
That's an excellent model. One of my favorites now of yours.
Yeah, it's sitting here resting quietly.
We look forward to whatever it is that you're going to have for us next week.
You and I will debate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for participating this evening. As always, excellent modeling.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our narrow-minded segment, which is a focus on narrow gauge with Steve Sherill. And he's going to do why we choose what we model and the scale that we choose. But before we have Steve come on, he's sponsored by Carroll Creek Designs.
Carroll Creek Design Group is an innovative new model railroad supplier with products for all scales. The Carroll Creek team uses advanced processes, including resin and filament 3D printing and laser engraving and cutting. These tools enable us to produce a range of products. We produce different rolling stock and motive power models in multiple scales. We are narrow-minded and focus on narrow gauge and unique backwoods models. We have a great selection of ON30, ON18 and HON3 products. Our product range includes complete kits, ready-to-run models, and detail parts. In addition to our products, we are available for custom design, 3D printing, and laser cutting. See our products on our webpage at the QR code. We look forward to meeting you.
Thank you for being a sponsor, Carroll Creek Design. And next we have Steve, speaking of heroes and great modelers. Welcome.
Oh, wow. Well, tonight we're going to talk about why we model what we do and why we choose the scale that we choose. So I'm going to try to get some help on this because I know why I model what I model, because I like, and I've always liked, a short line type railroad, and narrow gauge kind of fills that bill. And it's a challenge to kit bash and create some of the newer ON18 models. And so that's where I am right now. I have built these little micro layouts, and they're a lot of fun to build. They don't take very long. And you can just make them any way you want. You can make them caricatures. You can make them funny. You can make them for Halloween. You can do anything with them. And the scale is O scale, so it's about the same size as HO. And it has a little bit of size, and we can still use our O scale buildings. So now you take another type of modeler, like Greg Cassidy, for instance. Greg, if you're on here, I know that you're a HO, but you model Western Maryland. You have picked a prototype. Greg, are you there?
Yep.
Now, let's go and let me ask you, why did you pick Western Maryland? Although I have a good idea, because of where you live is probably one of the reasons that you selected that. You could ride to the Western Maryland rail sites and visit the actual scenes.
Yeah, there were a multitude of reasons for picking Western Maryland. Growing up in Maryland, when I first started modeling, everything was B&O. But as I found out more about Western Maryland, I realized they were more like an underdog. Everyone roots for the underdog. A lot of their infrastructure had not been taken over. It had been abandoned, which meant you could go and poke around it a lot more. And also its colors during its speed lettering era were black and gold. And as an old Lotus racer, black and gold was one of my favorite colors. So there were a number of reasons.
Now, on your railroad, do you model just certain areas? Like, do you model scenes, or do you model building structures? Or what do you...
Representations of areas with specific buildings that were in that area. I'm modeling the western sub of Western Maryland, which ran between Hagerstown and Cumberland. And I can only get a little bit of it into the small layout that I have, but I have a representation of the town of Hancock, and I have a building that was one of the cold storage buildings. Hancock was actually quite a fruit-producing area, especially with apples in the latter 19th century and early part of the 20th century. And then I have a couple of representations where Western Maryland had bridges going over creeks and into a tunnel. And that was a look that I really liked, and I was able to get that onto the layout as well.
Okay. So anybody have any questions for Greg?
Okay. I will say one thing that I found that I enjoyed doing, after building the layout, I've transitioned to building structures. And I haven't kept myself limited to HO in that, and I've built structures all the way from O and S down to N, and I actually have one Z scale. And modeling in all the different structures, I see the appeal of them all. And just by doing buildings, I don't have to devote a lot of space to one.
Have you always lived in the same area?
Yes.
Okay, so you may have seen some of the actual Western Maryland engines and rolling down the rails.
It's likely I could have.
I remember B&O was where I was growing up down there, which I live near you, of course. But thank you. Larry McDonald, I want to talk to you for a minute, please. Larry is one of our Canadian.
I'm here.
All right, Larry. Now you're an ON3 guy who also has O scale. Am I correct?
That's correct. Well, O still standard. They're all O scale.
Okay. Now, as an ON3 modeler, how did you come about to go into ON3? I know there's a lot of ON3 modelers up in Canada. Are they your neighbors? Or are they within travel distance? What got you interested in ON3?
Well, okay, first I'll just say I started out living when I moved to Toronto, getting into model railroading, and I was an HO and belonged to a large HO club. And I was in HO for many years, and I even actually modeled Western Maryland at home. I started traveling down that way and with a friend that was in the CNO Historical Society. So I joined the Western Maryland and the CNO and enjoyed myself immensely down there. But there was, like you say, up here in the Golden, around Toronto, there was a group well known, the Maple Leaf Mafia, which was, the name was given by some American fellows, which you will know, down in Kimberton. And that's how we got that name. We've mellowed it down now. We're Maple Leaf modelers, so we don't scare anybody.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I chose the ON3 because Lex Parker was a big influence. I went to see his layout. And just the detail going into O scale, no matter what, if you're an ON30, ON3, O standard, the buildings are pretty much the same size, depending on what the prototype that you're modeling or close to whatever you're doing. And the size of the figures on the automobiles, I just enjoyed working on them more than I did in HO. And so that's how I initially got in. I was welcomed aboard in that group, and I've been with them now for almost 40 years. And the thing I like about the ON3, I can be an O scale. My railroad room is 25 by 14 with 2 alcoves, and I can fit a pretty good operating railroad in ON3 in there, where an O standard gauge, it'd be more challenged. And
are you modeling? You're not modeling Colorado, are you? Which is
I was like everybody. Almost the whole group was modeling Colorado. We had then one fellow come on board, and he's doing a Cuban railroad. We have some other fellow. One fellow is doing a narrow gauge railroad in Ontario up here. And but primarily all the guys were Colorado, and I started traveling to Colorado, and the engines were available in Denver, Rio Grande West, and RGS, CNS were just absolutely beautiful. And they're still the nicest engines to this date I'll ever own. But I'm turning away from them. I have to go to other models to cobble up something that was on narrow gauge rails in British Columbia. So,
well, I knew when I saw the ON3, and I was around that for about 30 years. I just could not afford to go there. The locomotives were expensive, and so I had to. Closest I got was SN3, and I had a complete SN3 layout, but I didn't have any of the big SN3 models, the Denver and Rio Grandes and things like that, because they got too expensive. So I had to leave that. And then when ON30 came out, that's where I went. You know, to me, that was the answer. And so I moved, had a much larger space, a separate building. And so I built that my current layout, which, I run every day. Some of it's all battery powered. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Always trying to find some new adventure, to keep me interested. And so now ON18 has taken over.
Yep.
But there's a lot of great modelers doing a lot of different scales. And I don't know, Martin, are you still on here? I don't know if...
No, Martin dropped off, but
yeah, okay.
Steve, why don't I real quickly, this is Phil Edholm. I did an article for the NMRA magazine about this, and I think it really pertains to what you're talking about. So
yeah,
let me share just an image here, and we can
okay.
We can wrong share. I got to share the right thing. It's often a challenge. So this is a view, being an engineer and looking at data. It's an interesting thought process about scale, which is we talk about scale in a single dimension, but the reality is, as human beings, we perceive scale either as area, which is 2 dimensions, or as detail, which is 3 dimensions. And when you look at, for example, HO, if you assume HO and O, for example, are 2 to 1, where O is twice as large as HO, when you perceive that as area, you're going to perceive it as 4 times as much area. When you perceive it as detail, it's going to be 8 times as much. Now, the reality is it's about 7.2 in reality, but it's still a significant change. It turns out that squares tend to change at an exponent rate that's a square exponent, where detail is a cube exponent. So what this chart tries to show is the relative values of the scales for area and detail. So clearly on the left with Z scale, you get the maximum amount of area, but you have the minimum amount of detail. On the right with G, you get the maximum amount of detail and the minimum amount of area. And you can kind of see that the correlation actually falls for what I'll call standard gauge, where S is kind of almost in the middle of a ideal combination of detail and area. HO lends a little bit more towards area with a little bit less detail, and O obviously a little bit more detail than area. But I think one of the things you've referenced, I think this is very interesting for a lot of folks in this group and around the country, are if you go to narrow gauge, it allows you to go up essentially a scale in size. So for example, going to O narrow gauge gives you cars and also the rest of the models, because you tend to be modeling communities that are smaller in scale, buildings that are smaller in scale, because the railroads are smaller in scale, the communities tend to be smaller in scale. So it allows you to actually model an area that's larger, but get the advantage of detail. So I think one of the things to think about when you look at choosing your scale is to think about what's really important to you to model. Obviously, if you are a operations focused modeler and what you're really interested in having a large operating railroad and have 10 people come over, 15 people come over and operate your railroad, then area is going to be very important to you. So choosing a scale like HO may be important. If on the other hand, you're a model builder and you're really concerned about building highly detailed models, then choosing O scale and potentially narrow gauge may be a better choice. So I think it's just an interesting way of thinking about the trade-offs you have when you choose a scale between the size, the detail side of things, and the area you can actually model in the space you have available. And I think coming back to the comment that was made earlier by Larry, you're limited in the space in your room, so going to something like full size standard gauge O scale or G scale wouldn't fit, but narrow gauge O scale or maybe S scale standard might fit. So anyway, just an interesting thought as you think about these options.
That's right. And the other thing that's appealing about when I went to O scale narrow gauge, there wasn't the ready to run cars in the 1980s. It was all kits or scratch built rolling stock or brass. There was brass cabooses and tank cars and such.
Yeah.
Predominantly, you were building an awful lot more than I did when I was in HO. And even the same with buildings. It was building kits. It wasn't where you just go get a building and come bring it home and plump it on the layout and that's it. So that was appealing. And you get to be creative and sort of create your own signature. You're developing a signature on your layout that's unique to you?
Phil, now you're ON30.
Steve.
Why did you pick ON30?
So I actually was in HO back in the 80s and 90s. I had a Sierra Railroad Sierra Railroad themed private label HO railroad in a bedroom around the walls. Had spent a lot of time building it. Ended up having to move and tore it out, and that was kind of emotionally debilitating. And my job changed. When I got back to the hobby in 2015, ON30, when I was in the 1990 timeframe, ON30 was just kind of taking off. And I saw it as being a very interesting alternative to HO. What really got me into ON30 was I went to a train show and met a bunch of modular modelers, the California Central Coast group, that were doing ON30 modules. And to me, it was really the ideal combination of a scale that let me do detail and do modeling that I like to do. You kind of see that behind me on the image here. Mm-hmm. And then the modular was, to me, a great idea that you weren't building a layout in a room that if you decided you had to move, you would tear out. Yeah. And so really that's what got me to ON30. I think that finally the final nail is that the cost structure of being able to use HO components and quite frankly, Bachmann and the wonderful models they built in that time frame was another significant part of it. So I think I found it not because I thought a lot logically about scale of area versus detail and that, but because for my modeling interest, it was kind of the ideal. As Larry says, I've kind of always been attracted to kind of branch lines, smaller railroads, not the mainline railroads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Steve. A scale for every purpose, whether you want to do operation, whether you want to do modeling. That's an interesting chart, puts it all in perspective. Any closing remarks, Mr. Sherill?
Well, I just think that narrow gauge is really worth trying. Everybody thinks that narrow gauge is the Rocky Mountains and things like that. They associate it with that, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be perfectly freelance.
Yeah, exactly.
Create your own world, and the advantage of it is you can do that. Of course, you can do that at any scale, but it's like it lends itself to a narrow gauge where they would build a lot of cars in their own shops. They would do engine repairs. They would do all these things. And it just lets you create, I believe, a lot more than if you followed a standard railroad like the B&O or Western Maryland or something like that.
Agreed. It really depends whether you prefer prototype or freelancing. And like you say, there's no perfect scale or perfect modeling, but narrow gauge does open it up for sure. Well, thank you, Steve, and look forward to your next presentation.
If I could make a quick point, I would just like to thank Phil for providing mathematical proof of what we S-scalers have known all along. Thank you very much.
I knew you were thinking that. I did. All right. Well, next up, I'm up next. I'm going to feature something from the Rustic, Buff, and Old Gothic Railroad. I call it the Eclectic town of Turtle Creek. But before I come on, I'd like to run a New Tracks Facebook video.
Does it seem like eternity waiting for the next Wednesday night and a New Tracks event? Now there is hope. The New Tracks Modeling Facebook page gets you into the New Tracks community 24/7. Post, respond, and converse with over 1,200 avid model railroaders on Facebook. Show your modeling, ask questions, and help others. Join now, it is free and easy. Use the link or QR code to open the Facebook page.
Okay, so haven't actually presented in a while, but this is something that I've been working on, and it's pretty much finished right now. Of course, why should it work? Oh my God. Hold on a moment. This isn't supposed to happen to me. Okay, there we go. So this is the scene that I'm going to feature this evening. This is more or less complete. And I'm going to show you how I built it step by step in 15 minutes. I started by punching a hole in the backdrop for this tunnel, and then I ran these tracks around to the back half of the layout, which is not complete. This little scene was put in last year as a start, just a little hobo camp. Next up, I started temporarily placing buildings in the against the backdrop. I wanted a cityscape. I model gritty Pittsburgh and the southern Indiana limestone belt. This is the Pittsburgh portion, if you will. To the right is my infamous shanty town. To the left is more of the city. It's incomplete. So the first thing I thought I had to do was put in these tunnel portals. And at the suggestion from someone on New Tracks, they said, don't put in two concrete portals, put in two different portals to make it more realistic. So the idea is originally there would be a timber one and then later a concrete portal. Then I put in this is the only kit in the scene. It's somewhat kit bashed. I thought it would be good to put in a tower there because there's a lot of turnouts switches in front of it to the left. To make that tunnel portal, I used this cardstock and basically basswood. Then I painted it concrete and weathered it with a hunter line stain and some pan pastels. So that's a cost virtually nothing and really came off as concrete. And then I put it in place. And this is all cardstock and basswood, and very inexpensive, very effective look. Looks just like concrete to me anyway. And then I put in a little retaining wall here, and I use this pink foam. So as you'll see, I cut this down to fit. I put another piece of pink foam in here. Then I put with Sculptamold, I basically drilled two holes here, poked this in, and cemented it in place, if you will. Picture on the left shows the Sculptamold over the pink foam. Then I've put in additional gravel here. I simply take pure Elmer's glue, paint it completely with Elmer's glue, put down my ballast in various Woodland Scenics colors. Then I hit it with Woodland Scenics cement on top of that. It seems to work for me. These buildings are still just sitting there and they're not in place yet. This is that tunnel portal. You can see this is 1/4-inch material that I've wood grained with a razor saw. I begin staining it with a hunter line stain. This is that ship decking. It's a quick, fast way to do a buildup of individual pieces. To be honest, I no longer use it because they want roughly $20 a sheet. So it's kind of gotten expensive. Then I put in a retaining wall here, some billboards, and I put in the other side of the tunnel portal. I wanted to make sure I had walls in my tunnels. One thing I always, when I visit a model railroad, if I look in a tunnel and I see foam or unfinished, it always, it's not something I wanted to show on my layout, so I put in the tunnel portals. Now, it's kind of hitting you with a lot here at once, but I'm still trying to figure out where these buildings are where these buildings are going to go. This is my whistle stop saloon scratch build won 3 national structure titles. I wanted to work that in the scene. You see here, I've put in on the road here, I've put in tire marks. I built this little scratch build here, which is basically a place for the railroad men to hang out. It's like a watchman's stand. Moving over here to the right, this is the Porto Baracho Cantina. Gary Beatty and I exchanged structures. I was going to try and work this in, but it just never looked right. Just looks too different from what I'm doing here. We had a backdrop story, but I'm going to use it on another part of the layout, but not here. To put in the buildings, I basically put this strip wood in. You can see my tunnel portals are in place. I put this strip wood in to support a foam board. This is a structure I got from Len Eberwein. This is how I received it on the left, and this is how I modified it on the right. So I called it after one of my high school friends suffering from sobriety. Let us help you. Lublin's Hair of the Dog Bar. It's closed, boarded up before and after. So this is the order of the structures. I have the Hotel Riley. I have this building. I'm actually, to be truthful, I'm going to pop this out. I'm going to build another building in here. I'm not real happy with this one, but this is the order of the structures in that portion of the layout. I put a foam photograph in the back there. There's that foam core board. I put my Elmer's glue down, and then on the right there, I sprinkled my, it's basically a fine ballast and some Woodland Scenics material. The scene's developing here. It's coming along. I've put in a fence here. I put in some advertisements. There's the fence with some advertisements on there. I put in the stairs here. I put an outhouse in place, put in the scenery here. It's a layering process. I call it eclectic because there's a lot going on in this scene, a lot of detail. The more you look, the more you find. I put billboards up here, some advertisements on the concrete. Scratch built another building, just like a railroad maintenance storage facility. Here's the watchman's stand. Here's the switch stand. More advertisements here. I put an advertisement on this side here. Some debris everywhere. Underneath this is, you can see the pink foam. I use Sculptamold. I like Sculptamold because it offers a very nice texture. It blended into the existing Sculptamold perfectly. I used a Hunterline gray, I think they call it I don't remember what they call it. It's a gray shale. That's right. A gray shale. It's almost like a paint. And then I hit it with a dark brown stain. It's a very nice look. It's effortless. It looks like cut rock, like they cut this out. Basically, it's a Hunterline gray shale, Hunterline dark brown. And then I began additional just painting this with Elmer's glue, sprinkling the ballast on in various colors. Got a nice little road going here. There's that structure. There's more or less the finished. I'm going to put a structure here. I'm going to put a burned out building here. I haven't decided what I'm going to put here. Probably another burned out building. This is like the bad section of town. So, this is dilapidated. This is and falling in. This is condemned. I'm going to replace this structure. This is a house of ill repute. And I'll probably have a couple fallen in or burned out buildings here. But for now, that's what I've got. These are the finished, this is the finished scene here for now. If you step back from the scene, there's a little graveyard here. A little morbid, but a fresh grave and some more bums, hobos, tramps. This is a close-up of the saloon, the Whistle Stop Saloon, a couple of cars, a rusted out car. There's the overall completed scene. I've got some railroad workers here. These are the tramps. This is a articulated locomotive kit bash based on an HO locomotive. This is a Broadway Limited C16. And you can see I put some on the road here. I put some woodland scenics, basically weeds. Everything looks, when I say eclectic, I mean, look what's going on here. Everywhere you look, there's something to see. There's hobos, engineers, signage, the ladies, funny names for the buildings, just a lot going on. And this is ON30. Another shot of the town. It's supposed to be like a cityscape. A little close up, looking down the street. More overviews. There's a lot to photograph. You can do pull in close, pull back. There's endless views for photographs here. This is what I mean eclectic. Look what's going on. All these colors, all these figures, two different tunnel portals. The track is detailed. It's rusted. The railheads are painted. The ties are painted. And a lot of work goes into a scene like this, but it's worth the results. And that's the pullback. That's the scene. To the right is shantytown. To the left will be more city. That's what I got for you this evening. Any questions?
How much area does that take up, Tom, on the railroad?
About 3 feet.
Wow.
Looking at it behind me.
That's a lot of work in 3 feet.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on in 3 feet for sure.
Yes, definitely.
And like you said in your program, when you do freelancing and you do ON30, you're not doing really, I'm doing a loose prototype. I wouldn't say I'm doing a prototype. It's just all fantasy. You can do whatever you like. Yeah.
Hey, have fun. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we have our show closing and the Caboose, which will feature our final layout tour of the Pittsburgh Narrow Gauge Convention. It's an HO layout. Before I put Father Ron, our traditional close, I'd like to run the New Tracks donation video.
Do you enjoy New Tracks modeling? You can help support New Tracks in many ways, but donating to support the show and other activities is really appreciated. This helps pay for the expenses of producing the show, including Zoom, website, and emailing costs. You can support New Tracks financially in 3 ways. First, you can make direct contributions through Patreon. With Patreon, you can make a single or monthly contribution to New Tracks. You can also contribute through YouTube by using super stickers and super chats to donate. Finally, when you watch a YouTube replay, letting the ads run will increase the payout to New Tracks. Thank you for supporting New Tracks modeling.
I encourage everyone to donate first to the scholarship fund. And if you enjoy the show, although our expenses are minimal, make a small donation so we can keep New Tracks modeling live on YouTube and Zoom. $5 or $10. You know, we have 500, 700, 800 viewers now on New Tracks Live. $5 or $10 is big numbers if everybody donated $5. Take a moment, figure out how to do that, and help our cause, particularly the scholarship. Next, we have Father Ron. It's a tradition on the show, our closing. And Father Ron, appreciate you being on this evening and hanging out for the whole show. Do appreciate that.
Master Maker of the universe, our scale models imitate your creative spirit, and we learn the genius of your handiwork. Teach us to appreciate all you have made. Amen.
Thank you, Father Ron. And appreciate you being on, and we're going to get your modeling on. I tell you that every week.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Well, next up, we have Phil Edholm, who's going to run our Caboose and featuring the final layout, as I said, from the Pittsburgh layout tour.
This was a very nicely done space with a layout in it versus being a train room. It was kind of more of an open space.
You know, if you've never gone to a convention, a national convention that has layout tours, you're really missing out on a large part of the hobby. Bill and I, Jeff, we went around the Pittsburgh area and visited all these layouts. It was absolutely fascinating to me. I had never done it before, to be honest, and just really enjoyed it. Bill, you would agree, I would think, you know?
I think it's a great opportunity. I have to say that almost every layout tour I've been on, every layout I visited, I learned something, saw something that I've been able to incorporate as a future concept in modeling.
And that's the truth. In particular, there were a lot of company housing on some of these layouts we visited in Pittsburgh, and a lot of these coaling towers. And it's just such a great reference. And I've never seen one exactly like that. That's just a beautiful model worthy of pirating. That's scratch built for sure. Well, that concludes our show this evening. And as Jim Kello used to say, tell your friends about us. We want to get the viewership up into the thousands, and we need your help to do that. So if you have people that you know that are model railroaders that aren't tuned in to either the Zoom or the YouTube, encourage them to join our show. And I Thank you for your viewership this evening. Have a good evening.